Welcome back to AMGA. Trump continues to slide. Walz and Harris are target rich. And if you want to be counterculture, have kids in the family. All right, let's get started. It's been another long week. We're here on a Friday night, just recapping everything we came across. A lot of stuff's happened. Nothing more, nothing less since Tuesday when we got the all-in word from about Tim Walz and Harris. I mean, more polls keep coming out, and according to 538, the poll results average is roughly a couple percentage points in favor of Harris, and that's national polls, and it's starting to creep up in most of the battleground states, states like Michigan, states like Wisconsin, states like uh, Arizona and Nevada are all starting to see kind of a tilt towards Harris, and this is all kind of going along with the effects that a little bit of that honeymoon effect that everyone keeps talking about. Um, and I know that everyone on the right, and Trump included, he mentions this in his press conference that we're going to talk about a little bit. But everyone on the right really hopes, it's more of a hope than it is actually believing it, that 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 this honeymoon phase is going to end at some point in time. Well, the problem is the first ballots are cast at the beginning of September. Right, we're looking down the barrel about 3 weeks, and the first ballots are cast, and we have yet to see a slow momentum for the Harris Walz campaign. And that's very exciting for all the Harris Walz fans out there. It's not very exciting for people who have a disdain for the platform that she represents. And the problem is, what is that? We have no idea what that is. No one knows what it is. They haven't been questioned. The worst part about this whole thing is that up to this point, we've been told that Kamala Harris has been the last one in the room on every Biden decision. She's been a major and integral part of all the Biden decisions, and so that means that she should have some sort of impact on the current Biden administration's results. Right? Shouldn't that be the case? Shouldn't she be directly linked to it? Somehow, she's managed to distance herself from all of the results of the Biden-Harris administration, but somehow have been so important and so integral that she deserves the chance to be president still, even though the Biden and Harris administration has been lackluster at best. Right? It's not well liked. There's not a whole lot of excitement for it. However, she's getting to all of the positive parts of I've been in government and I know how to run this show. Also, I'm not responsible for anything that's happened over the last 4 years, which is wild. It's absolutely wild. And the only reason that's happened is because the media has never taken a moment, or hasn't taken a moment in the past 20 days or so, to sit down with her in a long form interview and ask questions and really dive into what's going on, things that she's done in the past, things that she plans on doing. We haven't had it. We're not going to get it. So Trump, for all of his faults, he's seeing that he's not in the press anymore. He's seeing he's not in the spotlight, right? And so he's like, okay, what do I got to do? General press conference comes up, right? So general press conference time. So in a world full of sound bites, general press conferences are uh, are a wild card, right? You can say something great, you can say something terrible, and with Trump, you kind of know what you're going to get. You know what you're going to get, something that's probably right on point, and he's going to nail something, and then about 30 seconds later, he's going to say something that's just like, dude, what the hell are you talking about? That just doesn't matter. Well, the problem is with sound bites is if they're left-leaning media bias or right-leaning media bias, they're going to grab the sound bite they want and they're going to project as much as they want. And in the current environment, the Harris Walz campaign has momentum, and so they have the leverage in order to push the sound bites they want to really paint the picture of Trump that they want to paint. And so Trump has to be lean. Is he lean in this media conference? No. Starts off solid, and then we have random deviations off into things that just really aren't helpful towards the campaign. Are they going to damage him? Probably not, but they're not going to help gain ground. That's the issue, right? It's not about damaging him. He might not step back. His floor is where it is, right? The floor is stuck, but his ceiling is really, really high, and it all depends on what he says and does over the next 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, really. And for Harris, the floor is really, really low. The ceiling's not very high, right? So she has to maintain where she's at, and so that's the whole point of this time right now. So we got a couple Trump sound bites. We're gonna play you, and we'll review them. In this first bite, he goes on to talk about all the things that are currently going on and that Harris is responsible for. Right? She was the last one in the room with Biden in all of these decisions, whether it was the Afghanistan withdrawal, whether it was the Ukraine Russia war. Everyone's very high, whether it was October 7th and what's going on currently with Gaza, whether it's um, whether it's the Bidenomics, right? She suddenly he mentions all this and he ties her to it, right? That's what you're supposed to do. Tie Harris to the things that are happening in the Biden administration. So here, let's take a listen.
The Republican Party and me as a candidate, but the Republican Party has the enthusiasm because people want to see crime stopped. They want to see a country that's respected. Think of it. If I were president, you wouldn't have Russia and Ukraine, where it never happened, zero chance. You wouldn't have had October 7th of Israel. You wouldn't have the horrible withdrawal. And I don't mean the withdrawal because the withdrawal was fine. I was ready to withdraw from Afghanistan, and we were going to do it with dignity and strength. And we were keeping our equipment. We weren't leaving $85 billion worth of equipment behind. And we wouldn't have had 13 great soldiers. I know the families of those soldiers well. We wouldn't have had these soldiers killed.
All right. So that's great. That's a great soundbite, right? That thing's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. He's nailed it. Okay. Well, you're like, oh, great. So we're going to get a good, solid Trump, real lean, real mean, to the point. This is going to be a quick 20-minute press conference. The thing was an hour and a half. All right. It's an hour and a half. And you got more, right? And so we got into detail. Somehow we went from her crowd size, and this was, one of the questions that was asked of him, and he took it as it was, right? Are you concerned about her crowd size? And he initially addresses it like, look, you guys have been not super honest about my crowd size, and then, us having to turn people away, and Harris is obviously starting to gain large crowds and stuff, but the idea that they have really downplayed the Trump crowd size versus the new Harris's crowd sizes is pretty true, right? And they've done a good, and frankly, that's what the Democrat Party is. It's a machine for making things like on their side look good and your side look bad. And unfortunately, the media has a really big part of that. So Trump has to do a much better job of addressing these types of questions, targeted succinctly, right? Not going off on some sort of tangent that really makes him sound crazy. Unfortunately, that's what we get. So here he is talking about his crowd size at his inauguration compared to Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech at the Million Man March crowd size.
If you look at Martin Luther King, when he did his speech, his great speech, and you look at ours, same real estate, same everything, same number of people. If not, we had more. And they said he had 1 million people, but I had 25,000 people. But when you look at the exact same picture, and everything's the same because it was the fountains, the whole thing, all the way back to from Lincoln to Washington, and you look at it, and you look at the picture of his crowd, my crowd, we actually had more people. They said I had 25,000, and he had 1 million people, and I'm okay with it because I liked Dr. Martin Luther King. Yeah.
All right, okay, right. Does it do anything? No. But the problem is, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have the two sound bites, right? You have the sound bite of the first one we showed you that's going to say, look, this is everything she's responsible for. She owns it. We need to press her for it. And you as the media need to be on it. And they understand that, right? The media kind of knows, okay, we're going to have to start asking these questions. But then at the same time, a few minutes later, we got to talk about how our crowd size was compared to Martin Luther King Jr.'s, right? Crowd size back when he was giving speeches. So it's not really beneficial, right? And it just makes him come off annoying to people, right? Like, and they're allowed to play this and start playing the old man game, and they start playing the old fool game. The crazy part about this is, it's not any different. Trump has been talking like this for the past 40 years, 50 years, right? Trump has always talked like this. This is how he talks. But that doesn't matter because now they can paint it in whatever light they want to. So in a world full of sound bites, he's giving too many sound bites that make him sound like he's losing it. But the reality is he's always talked like this. So nothing's really changed. But that's not the way it's going to come off, right? So I don't know how else to explain it. But if Trump doesn't find a way to he has great opportunities, right? He set this press conference up. He knows he needs to take the spotlight. If he doesn't find a way to just say the most important things, do not give the media anything but really clear, targeted sound bites that they can't use against him, right? They can only be used to help propel him or to help shine the light on the negative aspects of the Tim Walz ticket, or sorry, the Harris Walz ticket. then there's nothing for it. But the problem is he continues to create sound bites that counteract great sound bites at the beginning, right? And so we have this battle between, yes, great Trump, and then Jesus, bad Trump. But it's happening in like 10 minutes swings, right? From 10 minutes to the next. We never know. So until we can figure that out, it's going to continue to get worse. Now, Harris and Walz are full of sound bites that can be glommed onto, and that's the issue, right? Trump needs to go and grab all of these sound bites and all these little things that they've said in the past, and all the things that they stand for. Really, it shows what they really stand for, and put them on a sound system and just project it, right? Go after it. And so we'll listen to a couple right now. And this might be a Freudian slip and we can give it a pass, but the problem is here's a sound bite and here's something that Harris says that easily just, based off past things she said, maybe it's not a Freudian slip. Maybe it's not a mistake. I don't know, but it definitely comes off that it could be this way. And talking about population decrease, right? We'll see.
When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population, more of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
All right. So, okay, maybe she's saying pollution decrease because she's talking about other, decreasing emissions and stuff like that, and that's fine. But the idea is population decrease is synonymous with and with climate change, right? People link those things together, and so for her to say something as so in line with that type of thinking, it's not that far fetched for people to just be like, okay, well, if you go and if you bring that to her, if the media is pressing her with it, or you go and bring it up, say, hey, yeah, she might probably said meant to say pollution decreases, but the reality is pollution decrease, population decrease. That's all a problem. That's what everything they believe. And you can kind of tie that all together and package it and paint her with this. That's not what's happening, right? You can take all these things. Okay, Tim Walz, same thing, same situation. Tim Walz during COVID lockdowns was one of the stricter states in the union. Nothing compared to like California was. However, the math test scores that came back for his state because of how much longer they kept kids out of the classroom were infinitely worse than states that allowed students to go back earlier. And he brushes it off, right? I don't believe it. I don't believe that that they're not as bright, right? They're not far behind. I can tell you firsthand, having been in the classroom during and after COVID, that the kids are well behind. Okay, they are far behind, especially as a former physics teacher, right? I know that math is the most challenging one. I will say that math and reading for the youth was incredibly challenging, and math, particularly in older kids, was completely wiped out, right? Even for really intelligent children who are very talented at arithmetic, they struggled to catch back up because of the lack of interaction on it. It's a very tough language to learn, right? So here's Tim Walz kind of brushing it off and explaining away that no, no, it's all good. I don't believe it. It's not true. Okay, test scores are test scores, right? Here it is.
Takes the ACT anymore. I'm not minimizing standardized testing, but as a teacher, these kids learned resiliency. These kids learned compassion from one another. These kids learned problem solving. They had to figure out how to get online and do this. I'm working with my son, who's a 7th, 8th, and 9th grader during all this. I'm really proud of what he's been able to do, and I know this has been really challenging. So the idea of grading on this one test, again, there's a very different opinion about.
So all I have to say is that it's not. This isn't right, right? If your student went to one of the Minnesota schools and you hear this from your governor of the state who's brushing it off, like, oh, I know that we locked down a little bit more and we might have kept it. I wanted to keep us all safe, and it came out later that the proof was in the pudding that didn't really affect children as much, right? COVID didn't have the same effect on children as much, and then that going back to school or staying out of school didn't really have the same, didn't actually affect them in the same health wise as it would have affected them by being in school for their academic improvement, right? And so that's actually caused more problems. We've had mental health issues. We've had academic improvement tanking because of this whole COVID lockdowns, and instead they use it as an excuse, right? And so Walz just explaining this away, and this is an easy one, right? Everyone is painting him as some sort of great teacher. He knows everything, what it's like to be a teacher. He knows what it's like to be on the ground. Okay, I know that teachers unions during the COVID lockdowns took massive advantage of it, right? They wanted to not work. They wanted to not. This is the worst part is it's not every teacher, right? There's a lot of teachers out there, and just like in any profession, there's a lot of people that do the very minimum, right? The least possible in order to get the job done. And then in COVID, it was really easy to take advantage of the government and these government jobs, because now you could just say, I don't feel safe. I don't want to be a part of it. We need to create all these steps in order to mitigate it. And teachers unions were incredibly powerful in lobbying for their teachers in order to get what they wanted, to get paid, to not really work the same, and not even have to worry about the results, right? That was the worst part, right? You got paid the same, you didn't have to do nearly as much, and the results spoke for themselves. Students suffered severely, and it just propagated, right? It got worse, and these kids went on to college and they were not prepared, and it shows. It's showing right now. We won't see the results of this for years, right? We're going to see delayed students years on end. You thought it was bad before. Wait till you have a 30-year-old who's still struggling in their profession because they were so far behind getting out of college. It's coming. I'm telling you right now. Anywho, this is my point, is that the Harris Walz campaign is target rich. And these are just two small examples, right, that can be keyed in on just for things that are that centrist America will look at and recognize as faults with that campaign. Right? There's obviously far left things that the Harris Walz campaign are going to say and support that middle America already knows about, right? But it's these little things like this that if you point them out to middle America and like the centrist out there, and you say, look, they're not moderates, right? These are not moderates, and the things that they say are not moderate, and they don't actually believe this. And so the problem is, if you think that they're moderates in these areas, they're far left in those areas as well. And that's going to be things like education. It's going to be things in the environmental discussion. It's going to be things in the alphabet crew's rights, right? Especially for children. And transing the transing of the children, right? And that's one of these discussions that comes up in the middle, in the center, moderate, the middle part of America does not want to deal with that, right? And so it's a target-rich environment. And that kind of leads me on to my next thought, right? So I'll leave that at where it is. We'll probably see more bites come out with these people over the next few days. If media ever presses Harris for anything, maybe we'll actually get some sort of new up-to-date sound bites that Trump campaign can glom onto. I'm not especially excited. I'm pretty pessimistic about the Trump campaign. I feel like one of the things that is really dragged on him, we didn't notice it before, but I think after the assassination attempt, and then the second thwarted assassination attempt by the sponsored by Iran, supposedly, is that Trump is clearly gassed, right? He's lost a lot of his pep, and I feel like he's trying to fight through it right now. But at one point, he's just going to say, "For what?" Right, at this point, I've been demonized. For what am I doing this for? Right, I know he loves the country and he thinks he's doing what is right, and I can disagree with him on some things, and I wish we had a different candidate. But the reality is that he is trying his best for what he believes is right. But at some point in time, it just wears on you, right? And I think that assassination attempt is starting to sink in on him, and I think he's starting to think, they don't want me. That's fine, but I'm getting demonized for something that is wrong, and that's really what's driving him nuts, right? Is he's being demonized incorrectly. There's other ways. There's a lot of reasons to dislike Trump, but the things that are being painted on him probably aren't true, right? He's not a fascist. He's not going to end democracy. The end democracy crowd is the most ridiculous crowd. Both sides say it too, right? Like this could be the most important election of our lifetime. If you might never vote again, it's not going to happen. That's not the way that this is set up. Our democracy is pretty strong, and the way that we have it set up, it makes it very hard for that to even happen, right? There's no mechanisms for it, really. Okay, there's really no mechanisms for it. So anyway, finally, this all kind of goes back to what our culture's about, right? Our culture right now in the United States has shifted significantly to what it was 20, 30 years ago. And one of the biggest things that we're starting to see is what is counterculture now, right? It used to be counterculture and because of the always on lines, right? You got TikTok, the X, all these platforms, the always online crew sees true culture very differently from what I think the always offlines, or the people who are just working class citizens that are not buried into the political news, are not buried into online spaces. They're not spending time there, so they don't see the same things we see. So their view of culture is very different. And if you go and look at maps and you want to say, okay, which states are growing vis-a-vis natural born citizens, right? We have people who are born in the United States because the birth rates in those states are are flourishing, right? And it's exactly the kind of states you think, right? So I've actually pulled up a map. I'm looking at the states. The most the states with the highest birth rate per thousand, right? This is South Dakota and North Dakota. Okay, right. So South Dakota and North Dakota, everybody immediately hears South Dakota and North Dakota and they think Hickville, right? Okay, you can think that all you want, but the reality is that they have the highest birth rate per thousand of any state in the union. And then next it goes it just follows that same routine. Alaska, Nebraska, Utah, Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Iowa to round it all out. Okay. Uh, Middle America, center United States, the center lands, right, the flyover states, they're still having families. But the problem is those states are such low population. The actual culture is not get married, have kids, raise a family. The actual culture now is very different, and I would argue that while some will say it's less stressful, it's easier on them, right? It's more fun. It's potentially more selfish. uh, a lot of folks are opting out of not having kids, right? And there's a litany of excuses to not have kids, right? It's too expensive right now. I can't get it. I want to live in a home. I need to take care. I need to be financially stable before I get married. All these things are coming out. And okay, that's fine. We can make those arguments, but that's not, but what I'm saying is that the culture now is to not have a family and to not have kids. And that's a very dangerous thing for a country to be experiencing, right? When the culture is shifted to a point where it doesn't want to continue to build its own culture, you're going to take on anything that's imported into the United States, right? And the imports that are coming in right now into the United States are not necessarily great cultures, right? We've got a lot of folks coming in here. That's not to say that everybody who's migrating here is bad culture. I'm saying that the United States has established its culture, just like every other country in the world has its own culture. Canada has its own culture. Mexico has its own culture. France, UK, Spain, uh, South Africa, Egypt, right? Everyone has its own culture. But when your country is no longer growing because it's not having families and it's not having kids, its culture shift is going to be drastic and it's going to be different, very different from what it's established. And since America is such a young country, its established culture is fairly young. And to experience a birth rate decline like this in its most populated areas is very serious problem. So counterculture now is actually going to be a problem because it's going to kill off the current culture we have in the United States. So can this be reversed? Yeah, sure, it can be reversed, right? America is very resilient in that manner, right? It may find that in 10 years from now, we want to, the young folks decide, I do want to settle down and have kids and grow a family, right? And it's hard to tell because each generation is a little bit different. But millennials, Gen Z, right? They're just not seeing it. And we're not seeing it coming from them just yet, right? And I don't like to use this because it's a weird metric, but teen pregnancy is down, right? And it means the young folks are just not having sex anymore, right? And if they're not having sex when they're young, who's to say it's going to get better as they get older, right? Um, and so we're seeing an issue in this country that is causing a culture shift and may not be for the better, right? Because it's gonna be something that we don't know, we don't recognize, and it's gonna be something that we probably import. And so while there's a lot of great people, the loudest people in the room tend to be the people that are not good, right? Tend to be the people that are not good in terms of importing culture, right? The ones committing crimes, the ones that are uh, anti-American, right? The ones, and when I say anti-American, people tend to hear that and they think, oh, it's white people culture. I'm like, no, no, right? Each state's got its own unique culture, right? And there's a lot higher populations of Hispanic Americans, Black Americans, white Americans, Asian Americans in different areas, and each part of it contributes to our American culture. But the underlying ideas in the United States are all the same amongst those groups. It's the people that are coming into the United States with the expectation that they're going to be able to maintain their hometown culture from wherever they're from, whether it's China, Middle East, Eastern Europe, South America, come into the United States and maintain that type of culture as their and keep as their culture, and then push it on us is very different than what we already have here, and accepting the parts of those cultures, the best parts of those cultures, and integrating the American culture. But if you're not having kids here, it's gonna be very hard to do that. So Counterculture is now have kids, raise a family, and you're gonna be hard pressed to find someone else who doesn't believe that in today's day and age, because it's just not what's happening. You got too many dinks, dual income, no kids, right? And that's what people want. But we'll see if that changes in the near term. But I think it won't, and nothing's going to change so long as the government continues to support these um, individualistic ideologies, right? It's about me. It's about I, me oh my, right? And that's the most important thing. And when that's the most important thing to you, and the government supports that line of thinking, you don't really have an incentive to develop, right? And go out and give up you for somebody else. So we'll see. All right, that's our show for the day. Hopefully, we covered enough ground. I'll probably be back pretty soon. I have more time on the weekends, but that's AMGA at my garage again. I'll see you next time. Later.